Folks, something is brewing in Dunedin, and it is way bigger than just another spring training game. What was supposed to be a feel-good morning of baseball, fresh starts, clean slates, all that good stuff, turned into one of the most intriguing storylines of the entire offseason almost the second Eric Lauer opened his mouth after his first spring outing. And when you pair what he said with everything we already know about the Blue Jays' intensifying pursuit of Max Scherzer, you start to realize something important. This was absolutely 100% inevitable. The puzzle pieces were always going to collide. It was just a matter of when. Let's set the stage here. The Toronto Blue Jays came agonizingly close to winning the 2026 World Series. We're talking Game 7, extra innings, a heartbreaker for the ages against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Max Scherzer, a 41-year-old future Hall of Famer who probably should be retired by now, according to most human beings, started that game on the mound for Toronto. He gave manager John Schneider 4+ innings of work and allowed just one run. The man was electric, and now, with spring training in full swing and Scherzer still sitting unsigned on the free agent market, the Blue Jays are reportedly ramping up serious contract talks to bring the 3-time Cy Young winner back to Rogers Center. According to Sportsnet's Ben Nicholson-Smith, talks between the two sides have gotten more serious in the last week, with Toronto now appearing to be Scherzer's most serious pursuer on a 1-year deal. Other clubs are in the mix, sure, but the Jays want Mad Max back. Badly. And that is exactly where Eric Lauer comes in, because Eric Lauer wants something too, and what Eric Lauer wants is something that may not exist in Toronto if Scherzer shows up. Let's talk about what happened after Lauer's spring training debut, because this stuff is genuinely fascinating. Lauer went out there, threw 1 clean inning, 20 pitches, 13 strikes, 0 drama, and looked sharp. Great stuff. Good vibes. Exactly what you want out of your depth starter in a spring outing, right? But then he got in front of the reporters, and what came out was something that perfectly illustrates the awkward, uncomfortable situation the Blue Jays now find themselves in. Speaking with The Athletic's Mitch Bannon, Lauer was blunt about his desires going into this season. He said the whole bouncing back and forth thing from last year, where he kept getting shuffled between the rotation and the bullpen, hurt him in the long run. Not physically, he made that clear, but in terms of his standing, in terms of his money, in terms of his career, he wants to start. He wants to prove he can do it consistently, and he wants to finally get rewarded for being exactly the kind of reliable, innings-eating left-handed pitcher that every contender in baseball would love to have in their rotation. And honestly, he's not wrong to feel that way. The man put up a 3.18 ERA last year in over 104 innings of work across a hybrid starter-reliever role. He finished 9-2. He had 4 quality starts. He was genuinely good. And yet he ended the year as a middle reliever, which is apparently what ultimately cost him his arbitration case, a case that the Blue Jays won, paying him a cool $1 million less than his camp was seeking. Now let's be real here. Lauer's representatives were reportedly willing to negotiate something reasonable. They thought they had a shot. But because Lauer finished the year pitching out of the bullpen, the arbitration panel hammered him on innings. Because, as anyone who knows baseball arbitration understands, arbitration rewards innings. And you just don't rack up innings in the bullpen the same way you do as a starter. Lauer himself said as much. Finishing the year as a middle reliever likely worked against him, regardless of how it was framed. And now, here we are in spring training, and Lauer is essentially telling the world, I want to start. I need to start, not just for this season, but for the sake of my career, my earning potential, and my future. When you read between the lines of what he said, including his somewhat sardonic sign-off that they just have next year to worry about, you get the sense that this is a guy who is smiling on the outside but is genuinely frustrated underneath. And who can blame him? Because here is the cruel twist in all of this. Even as Lauer is pitching well and making his case to be in the rotation, the team he's pitching for is reportedly sprinting to add a Hall of Famer who will almost certainly take the starting job he wants. That's just brutal. That's the kind of thing that happens in professional sports, and it's ruthless and cold and completely makes sense from a front office perspective, but it cannot feel great if you're Eric Lauer. Let's talk about the rotation picture here, because it gives you a real sense of just how crowded things are getting. Right now, the projected Blue Jays rotation heading into the 2026 season features Dylan Cease, a $210 million man who signed in the offseason, along with Kevin Gausman, Trey Yesavage, Jose Berrios, and Cody Ponce returning from his KBO stint. Shane Bieber is recovering from forearm inflammation and won't be ready for opening day, though he's reportedly ahead of schedule, which is encouraging. Bowden Francis, meanwhile, is done for the entire season after undergoing Tommy John surgery. And Lauer? According to some projection models, he's expected to handle roughly 2% of starts for this team. 2%. That is not the kind of number that screams, "You're in the rotation, buddy." That is the kind of number that screams, swingman, long reliever, depth piece. And oh, by the way, there might be another starter on the way who's better than you. If Scherzer signs, and the momentum absolutely feels like it's trending that direction, the plan reportedly would involve easing him into action slowly, with a targeted debut sometime in late April or early May. That gradual ramp-up makes sense given his age and his injury history from last season, when thumb and nerve issues in his right arm limited him to just 85 regular season innings and a career-worst 5.19 ERA. But here's the thing, even a slow-rolling, progressively building Max Scherzer is going to be ahead of Eric Lauer in any rotation conversation. That's just reality. You don't bring back a 3-time Cy Young Award winner, an 8-time All-Star, a future first-ballot Hall of Famer, and then slot him in behind the guy who finished last season in middle relief. That doesn't happen. Now here's where the trade speculation gets really juicy. Sources and analysts around the league have been quietly noting that a Scherzer signing might actually hinge on whether the Blue Jays can move Lauer. And this makes perfect sense if you think about it. The Jays are already blowing way past the luxury tax threshold. They'd be paying a 110% penalty on whatever they give Scherzer, adding to what's already expected to be a franchise record payroll by more than $30 million. That's a significant financial hit just to add depth. But if you trade Lauer, you clear a roster spot, you potentially recoup some salary, and you get something back, most likely bullpen depth. And right now, with Jimmy Garcia sidelined and not expected to be ready for opening day, bullpen depth is something this team desperately needs. Think about the domino effect here. Garcia goes down, the bullpen becomes a concern, the rotation is deeper than the bullpen. Lauer is a guy who can pitch in both places, but who clearly doesn't want to be in the bullpen. Trading Lauer solves the rotation depth problem indirectly because Scherzer fills that spot, gives the team something back in the trade, and potentially addresses the bullpen gap that Garcia's absence created. It's actually a clean and logical roster-building move, even if it stings for Lauer personally. And speaking of the bullpen, let's not skip over what happened in yesterday's spring game because there was genuine excitement there beyond just the Lauer storyline. Tyler Rogers made his debut and looked every bit as funky and dominant as advertised. If you don't know Tyler Rogers, he's the submarine pitcher with the weirdest arm angle in the sport, and his stuff still looks absolutely filthy. John Schneider came out after the game and talked about how Rogers is the kind of guy who can give you 75 to 80 innings over the course of a season, a workhorse reliever in the truest sense. For a bullpen, that's been a question mark. Having someone like Tyler Rogers reliably eating innings with that kind of deceptive delivery is an absolute gift. The Blue Jays needed someone like him, and so far he's delivering on the hype. But perhaps the most exciting story coming out of yesterday, and one that deserves its own dedicated breakdown soon, is Adam Macko. This young left-hander was acquired in the trade that sent TJ Oscar Hernandez away, and he went out there and flat-out dominated. 2 innings, barely any traffic, and the only blemish was a walk. What makes Macko special is the velocity jump. His fastball is sitting 2.5 miles per hour harder than it did in AAA last year. We're talking a guy who could sustain 95 to 96 miles per hour with a full arsenal behind it, and if he can maintain that velocity into the regular season, his entire profile changes overnight. He's a southpaw with legitimate swing and miss potential, and he went longer than every other pitcher in the spring game yesterday. His ETA for the big leagues is essentially now. He will start a game for the Toronto Blue Jays this season, and after yesterday, the anticipation for that moment is very real. On the offensive side, the spring game also gave us some encouraging flashes. Dalton Voirstenbosch put on a show with 2 hits, including an absolute bullet off the bat, and top prospect Stephen Keys made everyone's jaws drop with a home run that came off a 98-mile-per-hour fastball. These are the kinds of spring moments that get fans genuinely excited, watching young players announce themselves against legitimate competition. The Phillies had some top prospects in the lineup, including a young player who's reportedly the son of former big leaguer Carl Crawford, which somehow makes the rest of us feel ancient, but also underscores just how real and competitive spring training games have become. And that's really what makes all of this so compelling as we head into the heart of spring training and toward opening day. There are legitimate storylines everywhere you look on this Blue Jays roster. There's the Max Scherzer situation, which could resolve itself any day now. There's Eric Lauer's future, which is hanging in the balance and will likely be determined by whatever happens with Scherzer. There's Adam Macko quietly building his case to join the big league staff. There's Tyler Rogers setting up shop as a potential bullpen anchor. There's Shane Bieber's timeline, Jose Berrios' health after a rocky second half last season, and the overall question of whether this Toronto team, a team that went to the World Series last year and came within a single game of winning it all, has what it takes to go back and finish the job. The talent is there, the hunger is there, the pieces are mostly in place, but the roster construction decisions that John Schneider and the front office make over the next few weeks are going to define the trajectory of this entire season. Do they pull the trigger on Scherzer and absorb the luxury tax hit? Do they trade Lowour for bullpen reinforcements? Do they trust the young pitchers to step up when called upon? Every single one of these decisions matters. Every single one has consequences that ripple out across the roster. And if the last 12 hours have taught us anything, it's that this Blue Jays spring training is already delivering more drama, more intrigue, and more compelling storylines than most teams see in an entire season. Eric Lauer threw strikes yesterday. He looked good. He wants to start. And somewhere out there, a 41-year-old with 3 Cy Young awards and the fire of a man half his age is getting ready to sign a contract that might just change everything for the guy who threw those strikes. This isn't over. In fact, it's just getting started. If you've made it this far, you already know you need to be subscribed, because this Blue Jays offseason is not slowing down anytime soon, and every single update, every rumor, every spring training twist is going to be right here the moment it breaks. Smash that subscribe button right now and help us push toward 30,000 strong, because the Blue Jays faithful is growing and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Should Toronto trade Eric Lauer to make room for Scherzer, or does Lauer deserve to fight for his rotation spot? And if you think this team is going back to the World Series, hit that like button and let's make some noise. See you in the next one.